Hello everyone. In this particular video, we shall take up a discussion of the question asked in UPSC Mains 2023 from the Indian economy section. As you can see, the question here is state the objectives and measures of land reforms in India. Discuss how land ceiling policy on land holding can be considered as an effective reform under the economic criteria. This question was asked for 15 marks and you are required to write the answer in 250 words. Let's first understand as to why was this question asked in the first place. As you can see, this question has been asked directly from your syllabus, that is land reforms in India. Apart from that, as you can see, questions have been asked with respect to different dimensions of land reforms in the previous year mains. For example, in mains 2021, there was this question about how land reforms has helped us to improve the socio-economic conditions of small and marginal farmers. Similarly, in mains 2016, there was a question about what role did the land reforms play in development of agriculture, and there was another dimension to that, that is what factors were responsible for the success of land reforms in India. Now, question here is how do you prepare for a topic such as land reforms? If you want to prepare for this particular topic, here you have to prepare for this topic by incorporating multiple dimensions. For example, with respect to land reforms, you need to know the background of land reforms, that is about the British land revenue policies. Then you need to understand the objectives of land reforms. What were the different components of land reforms? Then to what extent the land reforms actually benefited the Indian agriculture? What problems did we face in implementing the land reforms? And the last and most important, the relevance of land reforms in the present context. Because it is being said that the implementation of land reforms even today is an unfinished business. It means we are yet to achieve the objectives of land reforms which we implemented immediately after India's independence. Accordingly, now there's a talk of land reforms 2.0. So if you prepare for these kind of dimensions, you could very well write an answer to question related to land reforms. So what we will do now is we will discuss the background to the land reforms as to why did we need to bring land reforms, what were the objectives of land reforms, what measures did the government take as part of land reforms, and based upon that we'll discuss and look at the suggested answer to this particular question. Let's start our discussion now. So with respect to background to the land reforms, I'm pretty sure most of you must have studied about the British land revenue settlement systems. The British introduced three types of land revenue settlement systems in India, which included the Zamindari system, Mahalwari system, and Roytwari system. Each of these three systems were exploitative, but the most exploitative was the Zamindari system. In case of Zamindari system, the British transferred the land ownership to the zamindars. So the basic idea of the British in implementing the zamindari system was to create a class of Indian society which will always remain loyal to the British crown. So basically it was an extension of British policy of divide and rule. Now this zamindari system was considered to be highly exploitative because the British did not fix as to how much revenue the zamindars should collect from the farmers. So it is being said that the British land revenue policies led to a feudalistic and exploitative character of agrarian structure in India. Secondly, the land revenue settlement systems introduced by the British, they went against the very interest of farmers. How? For example, since the British did not fix as to how much rent the zamindar should collect from the farmers, the zamindars resorted to collection of high rent, which in some cases went to as high as 50%. Secondly, when the tenant farmers were unable to pay the rent on time, they were forcefully evicted from the agricultural land. And it also led to the problem of absentee landlordism. Last and most importantly, it is being said that in case of British land revenue settlement systems, the farmers as such were not owners of the land. The land was ultimately owned by zamindars. So when farmers are not owners of the land, they don't own the land. So there's no incentive on the farmers to make adequate investment in agriculture land. So imagine this, if farmers don't make investment in agriculture land, how will the productivity of agriculture land improve? So the agriculture sector in India was underdeveloped because of these policies. So what actually happened is when India gained independence, our agriculture sector was completely underdeveloped. I would say underdeveloped to such an extent that we had to import the agricultural commodities from other countries. Apart from that, land, we must understand land is a resource. And this land as a resource came to be concentrated in the hands of only few people. So when we framed the Indian Constitution, most of you know DPSPs, that is Directive Principles of State Policy. Article 39B and Article 39C seeks to prevent concentration of wealth. They seek to promote equitable distribution of wealth. So, in order to promote agricultural development and in order to promote equitable distribution of income as well as wealth, we started implementing the land reforms. So, the basic objective of land reforms was to end the exploitation of the farmers, to promote equity and social justice in pursuance with Article 39B and Article 39C, then to promote agricultural development. How? It is said that if you transfer the land to the farmers themselves, now farmers will own land. When they own land, farmers will now be incentivized to make investment in improving the agricultural land. When they make investment, the agricultural land improves and automatically the productivity of the land will also improve. Then we also sought to provide security of tenure to the tenant farmers so that there is no forced eviction and to protect the interest of the tenant farmers. So these were the objectives. In pursuance with these objectives, as part of land reforms, we both basically focus on three things. The first thing is abolition of intermediaries. What is this abolition of intermediaries? See, during the British time, between the British government and the farmers, there were large number of middlemen, intermediaries, let's say zamindars. So what we did, we abolished the zamindar system. We abolished the intermediaries so that the farmers can come in direct contact with the Indian government. Abolition of intermediaries. Second is tenancy reforms. In order to promote the interests of tenant farmers, we decided to regulate the rent, decided to provide for security of tenure and also grant ownership rights to certain category of tenants. Most of you have heard of the slogan land to the tiller. So this is what we did. We decided to grant ownership rights. Apart from that, with respect to reorganization of agriculture, look at the first point. The first point here is ceiling on land holdings. So what is this ceiling on land holdings? So you must understand that land is a subject placed under the state list. So accordingly, different states came up with a land ceiling law, which in turn put a limit on how much land should a person own. Anyone who was owning land beyond the particular limit stipulated in a concerned state, all of that land was taken away from the farmer, that is the zamindar, and that land was in turn distributed among the landless farmers. How? Let me just give an example. Let's say in a particular state, we have said that an individual cannot own, let's say, more than 25 acres of irrigated land. And let's say that particular individual owned 50 acres of irrigated land. So he is owning 25 acres of irrigated land beyond the ceiling limit of 25 acres. So that additional 25 acres of land will be taken away from the farmer and then distributed among the landless people. The idea here is to ensure equitable distribution of income as well as wealth, to promote equity, to promote social justice. Apart from that, we also decided to promote cooperative farming, that is, to organize farmers into cooperatives and reap higher economies of scale. Now, coming to the next dimension, that is economic reason for land ceiling laws. Why did we even come up with land ceiling law? What was the economic reason? See, in the question asked in UPSC mains, they have explicitly mentioned about economic rationale, economic reason. So you have to focus more upon the economic reason. Obviously, the first one is we discussed that land is a resource, it's an economic resource, and we decided to implement the land ceiling law in order to prevent the concentration of wealth and to promote equitable distribution of wealth. Second point, now it is being said that fragmented land holdings are inefficient. Why are they inefficient? It is said that if the land is quite fragmented, then farmers will not have access to inputs. The productivity of fragmented land holding is less. And lastly, the farmers' marketable surplus is lower. Hence, they will not be able to get the right price for the agricultural produce. So, we do understand that fragmented land holding is something which is bad. But there are certain category of economists who do believe that in certain cases, the small farms can be more efficient than large farms. How? Let me just give you one or two examples to substantiate this. Now, let's say there's a large farmer who owns probably say 500 acres of land. Now, can I say a large farmer who owns 500 acres of agriculture land cannot manage the entire 500 acres of agriculture land on his own? So, obviously, he will lease out the land to other farmers. Now, other farmers who are practicing agriculture, they don't own the land. They are actually cultivating agriculture crops on a land owned by someone else. So, when the farmers are not cultivating the crops on their own land, there is lack of incentive on the farmers to make adequate investment to improve the agricultural land. So, obviously, the land's productivity will be lower. It is expected that if farmers own the land, that ownership itself will incentivize them to make more investment so that the productivity increases. This is one. The second way to look at it is, naturally, the farm is very big. It is inefficiently managed by a single person. But if that particular farm, the land ceiling, if it is put and then the land is distributed among multiple farmers, the land holding becomes small. A small farmer can better and more efficiently manage the land. So, this is a debate, that is whether the small land holding is good or bad. Now, what we must understand here is, in some cases, the small land holdings can be beneficial. So, that is what you have to just know and write this as a point. Third, promotion of jobs. As small farms can promote more employment opportunities. Ensure access to credit. How? Now, let's say farmers own the land. When they own the land, what will happen in that case? Because they have the land ownership, they can get access to credit from the banks. And lastly, ownership of land would lead to increase income levels of the farmers. As the income levels of the farmers increases, demand for goods, demand for services will increase, and this in turn can spur consumption expenditure. Increase in consumption expenditure will lead to demand driven growth and development. So this is one point which you could have written in this particular answer. So having discussed about this, let's see now how you could have structured the answer to the question asked in UPSC mains. So when you read this particular question, you must identify the dimensions of this question. What are the dimensions? Dimension number 1 is objectives. Dimension number 2 is measures of land reforms. And dimension number 3 is how land ceiling policy is an effective reform under what? Under economic criteria. So, accordingly, in the body of the answer, you need to have 3 distinct parts: objectives, measures, and economic significance. What can be the introduction? Introduction here could be the meaning and significance of land reforms. And what can be the conclusion? Conclusion here is we need to address the challenges to reap benefits. What challenges? So there's a committee. The committee is called as Committee on Unfinished Task on Land Reforms. Interestingly, this committee has said that land reforms which we implemented after 1947 even today remain a unfinished task. In particular, it has highlighted that some of the states need to have a relook at the land ceiling policies. It has highlighted that the land reforms as such has been successful only in few states. Which states? For example, it has been successful in West Bengal, where we implemented a land reforms called as Operation Barga. It has been successful in JNK, and it has been successful in Kerala. Barring these states or these regions, in other parts of India, they have not been very successful. So you could end your answer with this, that states need to have a relook at the land ceiling policies because the land reforms have been successful only in certain states of India. Now this is a average answer. How can you enrich your answer? Value addition. How to convert average answer into excellent answer? One, you can incorporate the recommendations of Committee on Unfinished Task on Land Reforms, like I said, and you can use case studies and examples to substantiate the bullet points with respect to, say, economic significance or how the land reforms have been successful in certain parts of India, like Operation Barga, like Kerala example, and so on. So let's try to have a look at the suggested answer in this particular question. Just have a look at the introduction. The introduction reads, land reforms refers to a institutional measure directed towards altering the existing pattern of ownership, tenancy, land leasing, and management of land. The land reforms were introduced to end the feudalistic exploitative character of agrarian structure after India's independence. And you can see when it comes to body of the answer, I have incorporated three distinct dimensions. First dimension is objectives. Second dimension is measures of land reforms. And the third dimension is land ceiling policy as an effective reform under economic criteria. This is the body of the answer. What about the conclusion then? As you can see, however, implementation of land reforms was successful only in few states like West Bengal, Kerala, etc. As identified by Committee on Unfinished Task on Land Reforms, land ceiling programs continue to retain its relevance. States should have a relook at the ceiling laws and address the flaws. This is how you could have written an answer to this particular question asked in UPSC Mains 2023. Thank you so much.